everyone. I'm Lindsay, I'm CEO of Exchange Wire, and I'm here today with my wonderful panellists to talk about the future of CTV. Before we kick off, we'll start with a few introductions. I'm going to start at the end. Paul, kick off, please.
Thank you, Lindsay. Hello, my name is Paul Gubbins. I work for a global CTV ad server called Publica.
Hitesh.
Thank you, Lindsay. Good to be here, everybody. Nice Hitesh Bhatt. I run strategy for PubMatic for CTV across EMEA.
Chris.
Hi everyone, Chris Wright, Head of Sales at Vevo. I lead the day-to-day sales operation from our London office with the UK and international remit.
Thank you very much. And finally, Pippa.
Hi, I'm Pippa Scaife. I'm VP of Global Growth Strategy for NBC Universal.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So it's going to be a very interesting conversation. I want to kick off, we talk about the future, we need to understand kind of where we are right now and where we've been. We often talk about CTV with a very US lens, but I want to understand, as much as we can, kind of what's happening in this market, what's going on in the UK right now, what is the UK CTV market? Is it just YouTube, or is there a lot more going on outside of that kind of people like me aren't really aware of? I'm going to come to you first, Hitesh, on the hot spot there.
Thank you for that. I think in the UK, it's relatively nascent. I would say it's kind of the end of the beginning. It's kind of compared to the States where, frankly, free-to-air TV is not as popular. Pay TV is not as successful, not as convenient and cheap, frankly. That's driven a lot more CTV. I think that's starting to happen here. I think we're at a tipping point. You start looking at the huge content owners creating their own AVOD services. So, Disney Plus, Paramount Plus, Discovery and HBO, they're going to really make a big difference and start bringing in, the fact that premium content is not just on the linear broadcasters now, it's everywhere. I think that will be the tipping point to drive both viewing and then advertising.
Paul, what's your perspective on the UK market?
I think there's a really good slide that Freewill put up earlier, 35 plus streaming services now in the UK. And I think from where we were several years ago, when most people couldn't figure out how to navigate their connected television and find AVOD apps beyond the SVOD apps that were on the home screen, I think we've come light years ahead of where we were. I think this year is all about discovery. More and more TV viewers are proactively searching for ad-supported or low-cost streaming services driven by the cost of living. And I think that slide that illustrated the 35-plus services is going to really explode over the next several years as more people start building those apps for audiences to discover on connected televisions.
Chris, from your perspective, you operate, Vevo operates kind of in many different scenarios, many different platforms, YouTube being one of them. Kind of what's your perspective on the growth, what you're seeing in YouTube, I guess, directly, and the growth you're seeing outside of that in the UK market?
Yeah, so YouTube remains a really important component of the ad-funded streaming market, specifically premium element of YouTube. And it remains an important distribution partner for us. From our point of view, there is life outside YouTube, and that's consistent with other people in the market as well. There's new entrants to market all the time. Often they are US backed, so they have really significant financial and technological resources. I'd include the SVOD platforms in there, launching ad-funded tiers, bringing in new audiences that way, and then there's the existing and established ad-funded players like Vevo looking to develop our proposition all the time. So a couple of ways in which we're doing that. The first is around distribution. So I guess you would term it as a ubiquitous distribution strategy whereby we partner with TV-first living room platforms like Sky and like Samsung. It's about capturing as many eyeballs as we possibly can. It's a little bit of a future-proofing exercise as well because it to an extent, protects us against future disruption and fragmentation in that space. And then the second piece around programming. So experimenting and working on a number of different formats, whether that be on demand, whether it be linear, whether it be a hybrid, personalised version of the two. It's about creating the richest, most engaging environments we possibly can for our viewers, keep them coming back again and again, give them the optionality to watch not just what they want, but really importantly, how and when they want it as well. So we have a team that are really focused on custom fitting the programming experience for that specific distribution point. So kind of piece those two things together, and YouTube is really important to us, but we're building audiences incrementally off YouTube through distribution, and then also, I guess, more organically through discovery and programming.
Interesting. And Pippa, from your perspective, you know, in terms of, you know, Chris talking there about the I guess the ad-funded opportunity, what as a publisher, as a broadcaster with many different different brands underneath you, what are you seeing in terms of the ad-funded opportunity out there that exists outside of YouTube?
I think it's vast at the moment. You know, we as a business, as you say, we touch CTV in a number of different ways. We have channels like our news channel. We just announced News Now is expanding into the UK through fast channels with the likes of Samsung. But at the other end of the spectrum in the US, we have Peacock, which is obviously, you know, our big household name streaming product, which was one of the first streaming services to launch with that hybrid model, you know, allowing our consumers to choose between an SVOD or an AVOD play. And we've seen huge growth within that platform. We announced at the end of last year that we had close to 25 million subscribers. I believe we're going to announce a very different number today. So we're seeing huge growth outside of that YouTube environment, and CTV is offering us a vast range of opportunity that sits well alongside our linear inventory. What's interesting, I think, for us is what we've done with that inventory and how we've thought about our premium content, you know, aside from the likes of YouTube, and what that means for our advertisers. And we've invested an awful lot of time and resource in thinking about what innovation needs to look like on a CTV platform to move us away from the more traditional ad models that you would have seen in a linear environment or in a fast channel environment, or even potentially in a YouTube, where that proliferation of pre-roll and mid-roll looks set to stay for a while. So we're very much focused on the innovation that exists outside of those YouTube-like platforms. And I think as, you know, we have players like Netflix and Disney moving into the space that we've occupied as Peacock for a while, hopefully we'll start to see even more of that.
I mean, yeah, let's talk about that. You brought it up, big topic. You know, only last week Netflix announced a $49 billion wipeout of their value because they announced the first ever drop in subscriber numbers in more than a decade. Disney have also announced they're going ad-funded, you know, next year. So Netflix, as a result, have, you know, previously having said never say never when it comes to an ad-funded tier, have now definitively announced they're going to be doing it. What does those two players coming into the market, you know, coming into your realm, if you like, Pippa, what does that mean for advertisers more generally, and what does that mean for the breadth of opportunity, the breadth of inventory that exists in the marketplace more generally? I'm going to stick with you, Pippa, because obviously it's very relevant to your business model, and you brought it up in the first place. So
I did, and I could talk about it all day, and probably this audience is going to talk about it or hear about it all day because it seems to be the hot topic of conversation. I think it's really exciting. You know, I should probably sit here and say it's frightening, but I think, you know, it is an all boats rise type situation. There has not been enough supply. There's been a huge amount of demand in the CTV space for a while. And I think it is going to push us as an industry to think differently and to think more about what that environment looks like, how we make it more premium, how we make it more targeted and measurable, and how we make it more impactful for our advertisers. And I mean, Netflix in particular, I think is really interesting because they came into the market and basically said, we'll never touch advertising. And they disrupted the way that we consume content and the way that we think about our viewing experience by A, removing the advertising, and B, shifting to this kind of binge-watching way of consuming. And now they're saying, well, we are going to have advertising, and there's an awful lot of talk that actually that binge-watching experience might shift and they might start to do more staggered releases. So then you think, well, what's their point of differentiation? You know, what's anybody's point of differentiation if the future of TV is actually TV? Then how do we make a stand? How do we separate ourselves? And in my mind, that point of differentiation has got to be in the ad products that we're creating and the innovation that we're offering on the platform, and ultimately the experience that we are providing for a consumer. And you know, going back to what we've done with Peacock in the US, that has been the thought process all along. You know, how do we decrease the ad load that you would have had in a traditional linear environment? How do you move to like a solo ad or a prime pod type experience, which is something that we've been very successful with? How do you create products that follow consumer behavior? So having things like binge ads that reward people for staying for a longer period of time, or a pause ad that kind of, you know, follow you as you move through your media consumption journey. And you know, it's been very exciting to watch how our company's done that. So I'm fascinated to see how they're going to do it, because they are going to have to do it if they want to stay relevant in that marketplace.
I love the innovation and the evolution of the ad break, because it's something that, you know, obviously in the US there's a very different relationship with TV advertising than there is in the UK and across Europe. But in any case, like, can you transfer linear TV advertising to a CTV world? Arguably, it needs some change. And Paul, I want to ask you about that as well, because you and I had an interesting chat about that the other week. But I also want to get your thoughts on the Netflix and Disney entering that space. You know, from the ad sales perspective, what does that mean for the industry and kind of for how it's structured?
I'd probably agree with Pippa. It's fantastic for the industry. Advertisers want choice. Consumers are choosing to engage with TVs and content in different ways. So the more addressable inventory that is available to the buy side, I think it's fantastic.
Interesting. And Hitesh, from the perspective of the advertiser, what does that mean for the quality of the quality of targetable content that will exist for them going forwards? You know, will it mean improved audience targeting? Will it mean, you know, just improvement in inventory available? What will a Netflix audience look like versus an audience on kind of any current AVOD platform? Are they higher net worth? Is it going to be actually challenging because, I'm rambling here obviously, but, you know, will the people that continue to pay prescriptions, will they be untargetable by advertisers? What do you think it's going to look like from that perspective? You know, does the value of a user change? Like, is a free user more valuable than a paying user now for people like Netflix?
There's a lot in there.
There was a lot, yeah. Unpick that how you see fit. I do apologise. I got excited.
I think probably bringing it back to basics on targeting. Right?
Yeah.
Because, of course, these new platforms will bring new scale, lots more premium content that beyond where we get it right now. And there's lots of opportunities around kind of clever use of data within CTV. But right now, if you're looking to kind of grow CTV from TV and linear budgets, look at how they buy TV, which is really around content and context, right? So what we've been seeing is that publishers haven't been super quick to pass content data. Some of that is operational, they just haven't got the teams or the skills or the time to do it. Others are kind of nervous because they don't want buyers cherry-picking their best shows, right? So we're kind of going through a program of educating and working with publishers and CTV businesses to say, look, you pass more content data, you're going to get more money, right? Now, we can help you in terms of just how it works operationally, but also we can build in, you know, floor rates around certain shows so you are protected around your worries there. So I think that's the starting point. To your many other questions, I think, you know, that I used to work for Spotify, right? And they actually valued the free users more than the paid-for users because they were the door into the paid-for. So I think the businesses will value their free audiences as much as their kind of subscription audiences. It depends on who's subscribing. It's really hard to say which will be more valuable. It depends on who's subscribing, what your campaign is, your objectives, etc. So that's a tricky one to predict at this stage.
Absolutely. I mean, Chris, what are your thoughts on how that will change the nature and the value of an audience in that realm?
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is that it's not really come as any great surprise that they're looking to insert the ad-funded tier. I think if you think about all of the challenges that I think the revenue headwinds is the way that Reed Hastings describes it, they're significant between the cost of living, between the situation in Russia, between the natural kind of plateauing of subscriptions after the pandemic. So it's not really surprising that they're softening to those ad-funded tiers, and you've seen that hybrid model working really well in the US. And I agree with these guys, and I think it's really good from a consumer point of view. Additional choice is fantastic. I think it opens the door to lower income households. It opens the door to more emerging markets in the likes of LATAM and APAC as well. And I think advertisers are rightly excited about it. You know, I think if you asked marketers a couple of years ago, or within the last couple of years, if you could pick one ad-free platform that was going to start selling ads, they would probably choose Netflix, given the content that they have and the data that they have. I would, from my point of view, I guess it's about tempering enthusiasm a little bit on that, and I'm going to be kind of like the grey cloud on the panel about like the prospect of an ad-funded Netflix is, you know, you could argue, and as much as the hybrid model has been working well, we don't know what the ad format's going to be like, we don't know what the buying routes are going to be like, and also I kind of feel like the ad-funded users possibly are going to be cannibalistic to the premium users. I'm interested to hear that Spotify valued the ad-funded users more than the subscribing or the premium subscribing users, because
Are you surprised?
I'm surprised because
Yeah.
I feel like from an average revenue per user perspective, the subscription is kind of the gold standard, right? So yes, it might be a step into it, but I feel like it could be also cannibalistic to those numbers. So yeah, I feel like you could also argue that the more affluent and therefore more desirable audiences are still behind that paywall as well. So I think it's on the face of it really intriguing, really interesting. I'm not sure it's the panacea of CTV that kind of some commentators are talking about.
Interesting. And I want to kind of understand what that then will do to the supply that exists in the market more generally. We understand, obviously, kind of, from TV more generally, we talk about linear versus CTV. I think it's Vinny that loves to ask, if you turn the analog off tomorrow, signal off tomorrow, what would happen to the rest of the industry? I'm not going to ask that. But I do want to understand kind of what's happening in the linear space versus the CTV space from a inventory perspective, from a pricing perspective, and how that's kind of, will linear be replaced by CTV, or can they exist together? I'm doing a lot of compound questions again. I'm going to start with kind of, what is the relationship of linear versus CTV, and how are they working together? Or is there a world where actually, Pippa and Chris, from your perspectives, are they complementary, or are you trying to use CTV to replace your linear inventory, your linear kind of platforms? Pippa, your perspective, please.
I mean, in all honesty, I would say it's a bit of both. I don't think it's a binary yes or no answer at the moment. We are definitely selling linear and digital in a complementary way. We're more often than not selling them in a packaged way, and actually NBC Universal has created one platform in the US which is designed for exactly that purpose, bringing everything together into a single holistic sell. I mean, I don't think anyone on this stage can sit here and say digital isn't to a certain extent cannibalizing linear ad revenue, because we have seen declines in linear. We have seen huge amount of growth in digital, and I think those trends are set to continue for at least a while yet, although, linear looks as though it's going to be flat over the next few years. From a pricing perspective, we're not seeing huge declines in linear. We are still seeing very sizable demands. We are still seeing that same kind of buying model that Hitesh was talking about earlier, where people want to be in and around particular pieces of content, and particularly for a brand like ours who sells against a lot of sports and live events, that model is not going to shift or change too radically over the next few years. That said, when you think about something like live sports, CTV can offer a really interesting complement because it provides additional access. It provides more of an always-on experience. When we had the Beijing Winter Olympics earlier this year, we had all of that content live streamed on Peacock alongside linear, and the viewing figures on Peacock far exceeded what we expected internally for exactly that reason. It was always on, it was interactive, it allowed people to duck in and out of the sports that they were really interested in seeing at the times that were relevant and convenient for them. So I think there is a huge amount of opportunity to bring those platforms together, and really I think we're only just starting to see how that is all going to fit and work as we move forwards.
I want to understand more about kind of content and the definition of content and premium content. And Paul, I want to come to you and get your thoughts on this. Helen from Magnite, you mentioned earlier, she was referring to the Kardashians and Dog the Bounty Hunter. What are we defining as premium content? Is it professionally produced versus UGC? Is it who decides what premium content is? Is it the advertiser? Is it the broadcaster? Or is it ultimately actually the consumer? Kind of, is it where the audience is versus what is deemed to be a premium slot because of premium content? Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a great question. Personally, I think it's the viewer. But as an industry, we have to figure out what is television content. There's lots of debate about that's not TV content. I can't plan and buy CTV because it's not TV. What is TV content? Is it professionally produced, or is it user-generated content? You look at the likes of YouTube, increasingly attracting more viewers via their connected TV app, and my understanding at the moment is that they spend almost nothing on original content. So, it's a broad question. I don't know the answer to it, but personally, I think if a viewer opts to watch something on their television, that is the TV viewer making an active decision to engage with content. Now, if they're addressable and you can target them, and they're within an environment that can be planned, bought, and measured, then is that not TV content?
So for you, because for you the lines are very much blurred, as a consumer yourself, you are watching pretty much anything and everything on your television set.
Correct.
Right, interesting. And so from that perspective, you would expect that an advertiser would want to know to target you anywhere because that is quality content to you, and actually you're probably much more engaged watching that UGC from, well, maybe crap UGC, but there's obviously decent stuff on YouTube as well, as much as you are watching something on ITV.
Yeah, I think that the TV industry at the moment in the UK is on two very different journeys. You've got the broadcasters, you've got the AVOD and FAST apps. I think eMarketer said that 7 in 10 CTV ad dollars last year were transacted programmatically. Now, it's not just the AVOD and FAST apps that are attracting that programmatic demand, it's increasingly the broadcasters. ITV with all of their really cool innovation around Planet V, Channel 4 with their recent announcements in the programmatic space. However, from a broadcaster perspective, they can still offer a lot of measurement and all of the targeting capabilities that traditional TV advertisers require. So they're starting to test in addressable TV, but it's within those broadcasters' BVOD environments. But alongside that, you've got all of the AVOD and FAST apps and the smart TV manufacturers that are attracting a lot of interest from the buy side, but it's new advertisers to television, it's digital advertisers, it's DTC advertisers, it's social advertisers that historically haven't advertised in the TV space before, because it's either been too expensive, they haven't had the budgets to commit up front, but now the barriers to entry have been removed for lots of brands, and for the very first time, they can get their ads onto the big screen in people's living rooms. And that's AVOD, FAST, and the TV manufacturers are allowing that to happen.
Interesting, and I could dig into that, we want to dig into that a lot, but I also wanted to talk about pricing, and Hitesh, I want to come to you about what's happening in the kind of the broadcaster world in terms of pricing and inflation, and how that's impacting the CTV world when it comes to pricing, availability of inventory, etc.
Yeah, I mean, in the UK, TV prices are based on a formula, right?
Yeah.
Market revenue and impacts, impressions. And that's been a fairly stable process for the last, for decades, frankly. And then it's changed a lot recently. So, this year in January, inflation for young adults was 90% year on year, right? That's not sustainable. Right now, advertisers are kind of still sticking with linear and traditional TV just because it's what they're used to. But they're looking increasingly to where else they can push their budgets. So I think that will shift when we have, the scale continues to grow on CTV. That will help with the current price inflation. I think on an earlier panel talked about having a mixed strategy, whether it's to mitigate price of crisis here, you need to look at other areas here. And I guess, we're looking to build out what we would call, I guess, a mid-market kind of marketplace where, frankly, you can reach those people, the very same people who you can't reach on linear, apart from being that high-priced, at a more, reasonable, cost-effective price, frankly.
But if those advertisers are moving out of that realm and into the CTV realm, what does that then mean for the advertisers you just talked about, the kind of the new advertisers you haven't necessarily seen as traditional TV advertisers before?
Yeah.
Will they get pushed out by the big budgets coming in from linear?
Not necessarily, because we just discussed, right, the addressable marketplace in TV is about to explode. All of these SVOD apps are now introducing ad-supported elements of their offering. So it's not a question of traditional TV advertisers versus new entrants to the TV space. It's about bringing incremental budget to television. Hopefully, right, we're going to be sat here in 2 years' time and we won't be having CTV panels. It will go back to what it was 5 years ago and we'll just be discussing television. Consumers do not differentiate. They don't sit on their sofa and say, should we watch some SVOD tonight? Should we watch some FAST? Should we watch some CTV? It's television. But the way you plan, the way you buy, the way you measure is drastically changing. And that's what CTV is. It's a new approach to delivering ads on a television. It's not a brand new concept, it's just a brand new way of trying to figure out how to reach them and then measure and quantify that the ad spend has been effective.
And the money's not going to come just from traditional TV spend, right? It's going to come from search, from social.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because TV is the aspirational medium, right? If you can get on the big screen and deliver performance and deliver results, then that's where the money's going to go. And I think what Paul's talked about in terms of measuring results and for more performance-based advertising and D2C, yeah, that's going to be huge for CTV.
And so, Chris and Pippa, do you, internally, do you, what does CTV look like in your future in terms of how it's being talked about internally and kind of what your strategic plans are for growing that channel and that audience versus linear? Is it being called CTV? Is it being called TV? Kind of what are your goals for how it's supposed to look?
Yeah, I think in kind of the moment in time that we exist now, it's very much a complementary proposition to linear, right? And to think about the concept of pricing and inflation that we're seeing on TV, obviously it's that perfect storm has kind of created that inflation on linear TV. And to be honest, I think there's always been a little bit of a question mark around transparency and legitimacy of broadcast VOD pricing as well. So that's left an opportunity for CTV providers, and that's very much the value that we say that we can add to those existing TV plans. Because it used to be a case that if you wanted to maximise quality 1+ reach against certain audiences, you would buy linear TV, you'd top it up a bit of BVOD, and that'd be job done to a certain extent. But now there are other providers in market, and obviously I'm including Vevo in that, who can add real value, real incrementality, real efficiency at the latter stages of that TV reach curve. So that's very much front and centre of our positioning to brands now, and we would caution when they're selecting the different providers to work with, need to make sure they're using CTV platforms who have content that's of a similar and similar quality to what they're used to buying on TV. So it's an apples for apples comparison, and also selecting partners with complementing audiences. So not all streaming audiences are necessarily young. Lots of the platforms in that space have content that's 5 years old or more, so kind of more mature audiences. So ideally you want to be selecting partners with the same content, partners with dovetailing and complementing audiences, and then working with measurement partners who can prove out the incrementality and that efficiency across the piece. And that is pretty much front and centre of what we're trying to do in the CTV space.
Interesting. We're running out of time very, very quickly. In fact, we're out of time. But I do want to get your thoughts as well, Pippa, on kind of what CTV looks like in the future of NBC.
I mean, there's no denying it's a huge part of our future. It's a huge part of our present. I mean, it is one of the things we talk most about internally and externally. I'm sure a lot of people in this room will know. However, I will say that, we are a global business in the true sense of the word. We have consumers in 150 different countries, and CTV means something very different in different markets. So we aren't quite where you are talking about in terms of talking about TV as TV wherever that programming is going out. We have to be very thoughtful about, what is a FAST strategy and where does that make sense? What is an SVOD strategy and where does that make sense? Where does Peacock make sense from an AVOD or a hybrid tiered perspective? We have to think about everything with a global lens and an understanding that we are accelerating at different rates in different parts of the world. So we're not quite there yet. We definitely think and plan in the US in terms of one product, and as I was saying earlier, they complement each other in a really meaningful and impactful way. But as a global industry, CTV is at very different points. So we need to be cognizant of that as we plan for the future.
Absolutely. We're out of time, but I want to really kind of, one final question, give me 3 words. If you give me more, I'll get really angry. What are you most excited about for the future of the CTV industry? Or, as Paul says, the television industry. Paul, I'm going to start with you, please.
Addressability, measurement, and targeting.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Gold star for you. Hitesh?
Democratisation, i.e. allowing more brands to advertise on TV. Programmatic, obviously, because I think that's the way they're going to access it. And measurement.
Measurements are coming up as a massively common theme here. That was well over 3 words, but I'll let you off. Chris?
Scale, content, audience.
Interesting. And then finally, Pippa?
I'm just going to cheat and say add product innovation. 3 words in one phrase. Can I have that?
I mean, it's a solid one, yeah. I want to say thank you very much. It's been really interesting to chat to you all. Could have talked about this for ages. We ran out of time far too quickly. I do apologise for it. Thank you very much to everyone for listening. Thank you to Paul, Hitesh, Chris, and Pippa.